Hi, my name is Renee Hobbs, and welcome to Propaganda. I am here with the amazing students at the Harrington School of Communication and Media at the University of Rhode Island in this fully online class in the fall semester of 2017 already. And so you're probably already noticing that I see here online, I see Colton, I see Alex, I see Bethany, Kelly, I see Layton, I see Justine, Antonia. Come a little closer, girl. Come closer, come closer. Okay, so there she is. She's closer. Rachel, I see Candace. Welcome, Candace. I see Hasher. I see Michael Palagonia. Welcome. I see Sait.
Hello, Renee.
Hi, how are you, Sait? I'm so happy.
I'm fine. Thank you. Nice to see you.
It's 10 o'clock at night in Turkey right now, right?
Yes, actually at 11 o'clock.
It's 11 o'clock.
Yeah, right.
Okay, all right, but by midnight you will be in bed, I promise.
Yeah, thank you.
Jenna, I don't see you, but I love to hear your voice if your voice is available. Let me hear your voice.
Hi, I am. I'm here. I tried joining the video chat, but my computer wasn't working, so I called in.
Nice.
I apologize.
No problem. Calling in is a cool way to do it. If you're never not near your laptop, calling in is certainly qualifies, and that you are effectively able to participate in the course. Kristen, I'm just going to check your microphone. I know you're listening.
Yep, I'm here.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's take a look at our agenda for today's class. Let's see. You probably have noticed that if you go to the main page, our propaganda website, and you click on the box number 2, we get to the agenda for this week. This week in our class, we're going to develop a shared vocabulary for understanding propaganda as a complex set of practices and ideas. It turns out defining propaganda is a challenging issue. So let's start with that activity. We click here on the first item. So I'd like to ask students to read aloud. I think there are 7 definitions on this page. Probably you found this page when you were exploring my Mind Over Media website. This is the website that I developed at the Media Education Lab with the support of the United States Memorial Holocaust Museum as a way to develop a form of digital learning to support propaganda education. So Neil Postman once wrote that of all the words we use to talk about talk, the word propaganda is the most mischievous. That's because the word has a wide variety of definitions. We're going to read aloud these definitions, and then I'm going to ask you to kind of rank order. Which one of these definitions do you like best, and why? Give me a thumbs up if you know what we're going to be doing in the next 5 minutes. Good show. Now I'll ask a volunteer to read the first definition, please. Go right ahead.
Okay. Oh, who is it?
Justine, you go first.
Okay. Propaganda is a form of communication aimed towards influencing the attitude of a population towards some cause or position. And that's Wikipedia.
Thank you. Who's going to read the next one?
I'll read it.
Thanks.
Propaganda is a form of information that panders to our insecurities and anxieties.
Thanks very much. Who's going to read the third one?
I can read one.
Thanks.
I'm Jenna. Propaganda is indifferent to truth and truthfulness, knowledge and understanding. It is a form of strategic communication that uses any means to accomplish its ends.
Okay. Let's go to the next one. Who'd like to read aloud?
I can read it.
Thanks.
Propaganda is the deliberate, systematic attempt to shape perceptions, manipulate conditions, and direct behavior to achieve a response that furthers the desired intent of the propagandist.
Fantastic. Who's next?
All right.
Thanks.
Propaganda is a form of purposeful persuasion that attempts to influence the emotions, attitudes, opinions, and actions of specified target audiences for ideological, political, or commercial purposes through the controlled transmission of one-sided messages, which may or may not be factual, via mass and direct media channels.
Okay. And how about the last one?
I'll do it. Propaganda is intentionally designed communication that invites us to respond emotionally, immediately, and in an either-or manner.
Wonderful. So now you might want to open that window in your own side window, but now I kind of want to hear from you. Which of these definitions do you like best and why? They're all pretty good definitions, but they're different. Which one speaks to you?
I really like the second to last one.
So which one is that?
The propaganda is a form of purposeful persuasion that attempts to influence the emotions. That one.
Yeah, why do you like that one?
The fact that it said that it attempts to influence emotions, attitudes, opinions, and actions of specified target audiences for ideological, political, or commercial reasons. I don't know, I just saw the word ideological, and I guess when I look at propaganda, or when I think of propaganda, I really think of more using propaganda for an ideological or political point to really like hit people's emotions and attitudes.
Wow, thanks for sharing. That is terrific. You know, I like that definition too, but it's a different word that appeals to me. It's the word attempts, right? Because propaganda doesn't always work. You know, propaganda attempts to do these things, but it isn't always successful. Who's got another definition that you like best?
I like the one that I read. It's the fourth one,
Yeah.
the deliberate, systematic attempt. I think the part I like the best is because it really captures maybe the more negative side of propaganda. Because it really, like the end of it, the direct behavior to achieve a response that furthers the desired intent of the propagandist. So it kind of like, it uses the word manipulate in the way to shape perceptions. And I think that one kind of captures like how propaganda can be used in a more malicious way.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and I think that definition really does emphasize the intent and motives, right?
Yeah, I agree. Like the person who's doing it is trying to make you think the way they want to. It's very manipulative. It's interesting.
Yeah, so that is an interesting definition. Anybody pick a different definition? If you had to rank order, which one of these definitions do you like the best? Any other one that sort of seems to resonate with you?
I thought the second one was interesting. That it panders to our insecurities and anxieties.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point to make, because when you're making any form of an argument, regardless of whether or not you're considering it propaganda, you have to consider the audience. And I think specifically with propaganda, because you're trying to get people to think in like an ideological or a political way, you do have to, in some way, consider their insecurities and anxieties.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. I think that's a really fascinating definition too. So we learned from our readings this week, the Lexicon of Lies by Caroline Jack, that the definition of propaganda is messy. In fact, the definition that Caroline Jack uses in her article is one that I kind of disagree with, right? Why is it that there are so many different definitions of propaganda and people can disagree about what it really is? Why are there so much different points of view about the definition of this word?
I feel like it's because there's so many different points of view in general for propaganda itself. Like, you can take it however you want to take it. So, like, say somebody's like really hardcore like Republican and they see something offensive to Republicans and they're like, this is so offensive, like blah blah blah, but somebody is very liberal and they're like, this is so funny, like, what do you mean it's offensive? So it all depends on like how you take it.
Yeah, good point. So there's this issue of interpretation. Stuff that you might say is information, I might call propaganda, right? Stuff that you think is entertainment, somebody else might say is propaganda, because our interpretations are different because of our life experiences. Are there any other reasons why the word propaganda is so controversial and the meanings are so variable and unstable? Why we don't all agree on the definitions of propaganda?
Definitely when it comes to the idea of smear campaigns, especially during U.S. elections. It's like I posted on my post about the smear campaign that was posted from John McCain's campaign group about Barack Obama not being born within the United States because of his middle name, Hussein, all that other information. So, it's kind of hard to believe what information given, because everything is meant to influence the audience, and the host is meant to like try to influence them to go their way, try to get what they do, what they want them to do.
Right.
So it's very controversial, the things that are put out, and it can be very persuasive. So I think it can be kind of harmful, and it's kind of complicated to just put propaganda into like one group. It can be used in many different ways.
Right. What a great example there. The original meaning of the word propaganda comes from the Catholic Church, which established a propaganda office during the Inquisition, right? As a way to counter all the bad press they were getting. And the rise of Protestantism, which was a threat to Catholicism. Propaganda did not acquire its negative connotation until World War I. And so even today, we can think a lot about the idea that propaganda might be beneficial or harmful depending on your point of view. So that's where that topic is what I'd like to explore next. So you got introduced to a lot of vocabulary words by reading the Caroline Jack essay. And so down here in my slide share, do you guys see my slide share here? What I'd like to do is see how many of these terms you're able to explain, define, or give an example. In this short report, Caroline Jack introduces the terms misinformation, disinformation, agitprop, public relations, publicity, public affairs, public diplomacy, advertising, advertorial, information operations. She refers to white, gray, and black propaganda, gaslighting, desinformation, yuan shuan, satire, parody, culture jamming, and hoaxes. So, you might want to keep that slide open. Did you see how? Give me a thumbs up if you saw how I got to it by opening up my slide deck and going to the second slide, right? Those are the vocabulary words in the readings for this week. What I'd like to do now is do a little pair share activity. That's where you and one other person talk over at least three of those definitions. So you share, your partner shares, you share, your partner shares. In 4 minutes or so, you should identify at least 3 or 4 definitions that you can confidently explain to our whole group. Give me a thumbs up if you understand what we're doing next. It's called pair share. It should be fun. I'm going to break you up into, let's see, 8 rooms, no, 7 rooms. How about 6 rooms? There you go. So there might be 3 people in your group. You'll get a little notice here to join that small group. See if you can find 3 or 4 definitions. And we'll meet back in about 5 minutes. Okay. All right. So Jenna, you and I are alone together, my friend. And
Okay.
why don't we, I'm just going to exit full screen here. Why don't we see if we can talk about some of these terms? Advertising, public relations, misinformation, disinformation. Which one of these can you explain and define in your own words?
Let's see. I thought the Agitprop, that was a word that was totally new to me. But the definition that I have is a propaganda campaign that's used to provoke the audience to take a particular action. And the way that I interpreted it was, it sounds just kind of like it can be applied to any propaganda campaign. It seems to me that propaganda is used to get a person to take an action regardless of whether that's a physical action or if they're trying to get them to adopt a certain way of thinking. But I did think it was interesting that the author in that text noted that there's like a association more negatively with that word because it's so strongly associated with like Marxism.
Right.
That was a very interesting word to me.
Yeah, I think that word does have a specific like time period that it's associated with.
Yeah.
Interesting point about this idea of agitation, right? Where you might like rile people up that they have to take action. And I do think that sometimes propaganda is designed to rile us up to take action. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. Alex, do you see a word on this list that you can define from the readings for this week?
Well, I like the word publicity because that's something that we're exposed to every day. And now whether or not, it's good or bad publicity, it means like it's getting talked about. So I don't think there's such a thing as good or bad. It's only good if it's getting talked about. That way it's in the eyes of the public.
There's no such thing as bad publicity. Yeah.
That's why I like that word.
Yep. And publicity is a form of propaganda, right? Because it's trying to influence attitudes or change behaviors. The word that I'm interested in and that I feel like I have had some experience with is public diplomacy. This past year, I had the opportunity to engage in public diplomacy when the U.S. State Department sent me to Germany and to Italy to talk about fake news. And I was really fascinated by that because, like, why would the U.S. government, the Trump administration, right, send me to foreign countries to talk about fake news? And I realized that the overall message, and they were very transparent about it. They said, look, Renee, we want our friends in Europe to understand that one of the unique characteristics of being an American is the freedom to criticize people in power, right? And that our freedom of expression and our strong free press traditions means people can be very, very critical of the current administration and still be free to express those opinions. And of course, that's not true in many countries around the world, where expressing critical opinions about the government could get you in jail. So I was, involved in public diplomacy. And so I felt like it did, I don't know if it had the impact they were hoping, but it was definitely, it was a form of propaganda. So, okay, so we've defined at least 3 terms. We've accomplished the goals of the class. One term that was new to me was the term, I think it's pronounced Shuan. And this year I have a visiting scholar from China, and she sometimes shows me all the really good news of coming from China shared by the government. It's just good news about how great the country is. And I think it's a really interesting strategy that propaganda can be accomplished by spreading positive news, right? Propaganda making people feel good about being Chinese, for example, and
Right.
making people feel proud of their government and their country. So I don't think we do that very much in the U.S.
No, that's something they do in North Korea too, I think.
Ah.
Yeah.
I know I read last year I had a professor, Guoming Chen, who is from Taiwan, and he said all the other, Asian countries kind of made fun of, was it Kim Jong-un for doing that sort of thing, and he told the North Korean people that they won every gold medal in the Olympics because they don't have TVs or whatnot.
Right. So there's an example of where his style of propaganda is to make people feel proud or good about their heritage.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to close. We accomplished our goals, right? We got 3 terms or 4 terms that we can reflect upon. You might look down that list and see which ones are not familiar to you, because those are probably the ones we should talk about. So it looks like you're coming back from the breakout session. And I'm going to now invite you to take a look at the words that you aren't so comfortable defining. So as you look back at that list, it might be worthwhile to see which of these terms are not so easy to define or explain. So I bet some of you guys talked about some of these terms, but I don't know that we talked about all of them. Is there one on this list that's not so, that we would like to define with more precision?
I would say gaslighting. For example, Trump, when he stated at one of his conferences how we have a so-called, an enthusiastic way of putting that we would like to be friends with North Korea, when really he was making us look like idiots. So he inaccurately narrated our relationship with North Korea. That would be a way of putting gaslighting in that situation.
In order to destabilize our ability to trust, people can engage in gaslighting, right? To create uncertainty, and uncertainty might have a strategic advantage, right? In this case, maybe the strategic advantage he's seeking is with destabilizing that government. Okay, so gaslighting is a complicated term, and we understand it's used in different ways. Any other terms on this list that are not so, that are the ones that are most unfamiliar to you? And so,
Disinformation or whatever. I was trying to read that. I was confusing. What,
oh yeah,
the Soviet Union or something? There's a Soviet mindset.
Yeah. So that Disinformation word, as I remember from the reading, Caroline Jack was saying that one and Yuan Shuan are terms used in Russia and China to refer to their form of propaganda, right? And that because Russia has long used this propaganda to influence public opinion, that term is the term they use in their language. And Caroline Jack seemed to warn us, like, we should be cautious about using the terms that are used in other countries. She said something like, because how these terms are understood is culturally specific. So we might use the term Disinformation to refer to, for instance, the Russian-created Facebook accounts, right? We learned about that last week, where Russians created a bunch of fake Facebook accounts and started to use, during the election process, started to send messages with those fake accounts. But Caroline Jack might quibble on whether or not that would be the appropriate term for that form of propaganda. One of the things I'm really fascinated is between the difference between misinformation and disinformation. Did anybody in our group explore those terms and define those terms? What's the difference between misinformation and disinformation?
Yeah, we talked about that in our group, especially how relevant it is today, anytime you turn on the news. But misinformation is really just that it's unintentional. So it could be like a journalist reporting on a breaking event and they fail to check their sources, and so they have to kind of retract what they're saying after. Whereas disinformation is definitely more deliberate. And it's interesting to see those two, because I think this is where that kind of new term of like fake news is coming from. It's not fake news, it's either misinformation or disinformation that is so popular.
Thanks for sharing. So clearly, although we're starting with definitions this week, we've got a whole lot of words to manage. We definitely want to appreciate the fact that words can't fully explain the complexity of this phenomenon, and the meanings of words change over time. And at different time periods, we use different words. Like, for instance, Caroline Jack uses gray propaganda, white propaganda, and black propaganda. Those are terms used in the 1940s to describe propaganda that might be disguised, black propaganda where you don't know who created it, white propaganda where you know who the source was, right? But those terms aren't so common anymore. They were kind of specific to a time period back during World War II. So I imagine that new terms are going to be evolving all the time. And of course, I'm interested in those new terms. So as part of my own work in this area, I've created some new terms. And I'm now, let's see, give me a thumbs up if you can see my slides on the screen, right? Yeah. So I'm now kind of moving on from the Mind Over Media website, which I hope you had a chance to explore, right? More than 700 examples of propaganda from all over the world. I like this definition of propaganda the best. So this is your professor's definition. It's one that we're gonna explore in more depth this semester. So when people ask me how to define propaganda, I say it appears in many forms. It's strategic and intentional. It aims to influence attitudes, opinions, and behaviors. It can be beneficial or harmful. It might use truth, half-truths, or lies. And to be successful, propaganda taps into our deepest values, fears, hopes, and dreams. Propaganda uses any means to accomplish its goal. So if you came into this course thinking all propaganda was bad, right away, this definition challenges that idea. Sometimes propaganda can be beneficial, as we're going to learn. If you think propaganda is all lying, well, this definition challenges that, because oftentimes, propaganda uses information that is true, right? But just as one of you identified propaganda pandering to our insecurities and anxieties, I like the idea that to be successful, propaganda taps into our deepest values, fears, hopes, and dreams. So now, we learned this week that propaganda can be found in many different places, in journalism, in public relations, in advertising, in government, in education, in entertainment, in advocacy. And most of the time, we're not used to thinking about propaganda in education. We're not used to thinking about propaganda in entertainment. And so that's sometimes challenging to recognize how propaganda can be found in those forms. This week, I'm going to ask you to look at a really interesting poster. It was created by the European Association for Viewer Interests in Brussels, and it identifies 10 forms of fake news. For each of the definitions, it hints at what is the motivation of the person creating this. Is it money, politics or power, humor or fun, passion, and misinformation? And so I'll ask you to take a look at this poster to learn new terms, including propaganda, of course, a term we know already pretty well, but the concept of partisanship, and terms like clickbait and sponsored content, and terms like conspiracy theories and pseudoscience, and terms like misinformation and bogus information, satire and hoaxes, and misinformation, or what they call error. So I'm inviting for you to take a close look this week at that poster and make sure you understand those definitions as well. Of course, I think it's interesting to think about propaganda being something that people have been teaching about for a long time. The earliest scholarship that I'm aware of happened right before America got into World War II, when a group of journalists and scholars created the Institute for Propaganda Analysis way back when. They were among the first to tell us that propaganda is easily recognizable if it activates strong emotions, responds to audience needs, simplifies information and ideas, and attacks opponents. And that's an interesting rubric for learning to spot propaganda. So, but I think it's really important to recognize that propaganda is not a silver bullet. It does not always work. Propaganda is not brainwashing. It is not mind control. And propaganda can be more or less effective. And its effectiveness depends on the context. Like, what is the nature of the information or the ideas?
5 rushes for 10 yards and a touchdown.
What's the message?
Said the only running back move that we are right now with the Cardinals is to sign DJ Foster off the Patriots practice squad.
What techniques are used to attract attention, right? How did the message reach people? Where and when and how did people encounter the message? And then how did people respond to it? And how free are they to accept or reject it? So in some ways, those ideas about thinking through the context in which propaganda occurs is going to be kind of important to us. Okay, so I feel like we are now ready to go back to our agenda. Let's see if I can figure out how to go back to the agenda. Let me see here. Okay. So if you click this link right here, link number 3, you'll be able to take a close look at that poster that I've kind of cut up into little bits for you. I do want to comment on those of you who shared with me your course blogs. If you did share a course blog with me, you can see that I put it on the class roster, right? You see the class roster if you click on this here. So Kelly, Bethany, Colton, Leighton, Aaron, Jenna, Michael, Addison, Rachel. I received your blogs before this class, and I found them by going over here to our Twitter. I am eager to get blogs from each of you, hopefully by tonight at midnight. Right? By tonight at midnight, if you haven't already created your blog, send it to me this way. Michael, you win the prize for having a well-formed tweet. Except I want to illustrate one really interesting thing about tweeting that maybe you are aware or not aware of. When you put the name of the person in the beginning of the tweet, it can only be seen by me and by the people who follow me. Right? So sometimes, in this case, Michael, I bet you did that on purpose because you wanted to make sure that I saw that you had done this assignment.
Yeah.
Sometimes you want to restrict your communication to few people, and sometimes you want to communicate to your whole network, right? Or potentially the whole world. So I like Addison. Addison, I like this the tone of this tweet. Hey, Twitter followers, I just made a blog for my COM 416 course on propaganda. Then you call out my name. You've got the hashtag and you have the link to your URL. So now, does anybody have any questions about establishing a Twitter account and creating a blog? Any questions about that? Okay, so that's good. I feel like you guys are on top of that, and I'm pretty happy to see that. Basically, the major writing and creative work that you're going to be doing for this class is going to be there on your blog, right? So having that blog up and running now is really great. Let me review a little bit about the work that you did for me last week. I think by now it's pretty clear about the idea that we're kind of pushing forward, right? So this week we've learned about defining propaganda, and next week we're going to tackle the question of marketing, right? So from today to next Tuesday, we're going to be in week 3, but it makes me very, very pleased to see how many of you completed almost all of these activities. 74% of you introduced yourselves, 89% of you read the Caroline Jack article, and so forth. I was really, really pleased to see how you handled the fake news wasn't the problem. And one of the things that's most interesting is to rewatch this video with the comments. Right?
There's nothing new about fake news. I used to see in the supermarkets, the Weekly World.
So what's really cool is I did try to comment on some of your comments. And so as you rewatch this video, you'll be able to see my comments on your comments. And I'm trying to do that to provide some context for appreciating. So if you click on like one response, right? This is a comment from you, Jenna. Jenna, you wrote, I can recall every time I turned on a news channel, I was always hearing something about Hillary Clinton's emails. I began to tune it out because I felt as every channel was just repeating the same story. Whereas they had many different things to talk about when it came to Trump. This is where I definitely saw an example of false equivalence. That's the concept that's introduced in this video. And I responded by saying, turns out simple repetition can be a powerful form of propaganda. So I'm really glad to see your thoughtfulness in responding to the content of the idea and the materials that we're using in this class. And I think sometimes if you are first to arrive at the site, you may miss some of the really cool conversations that are emerging. So you might want to take a look and try that again. Okay, so some of you guys asked questions about how the points are awarded, and you've probably already figured out that sometimes you get a point automatically, literally just by clicking on that link, and I'm making an assumption that you're doing the work. And other times, for example, here, where you aren't going to get the 4 points until I go to the website and see that you have correctly made a blog and a Twitter. So some of you have written to me and said, I didn't get my 4 points, and it's like, be patient, right? You will, right? So that happens through the review process. Now, as you've been experiencing the path right, Saeed, I know you've been monitoring student performance pretty closely as the teaching assistant. I know you're watching as students are moving through this, this tool. What have you noticed about students' work during week 2?
Actually, their work is good, and that lots of students in our Pathright account and about our paths.
Good. So we are feeling pretty confident. Do you have any questions? Does anybody have any questions about your experience using the Pathright? What do you like about it? What do you dislike about it? What are you noticing so far as you've been using that tool? Okay, so you are dealing, right? Justine's laughing. She's like, yeah, it's right. It's what it is. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about, let's talk a little bit about your major first big project for next week. I hope you had a chance to look at Leap 1. Leap 1's called Propaganda in My Life. Give me a thumbs up if you've already had a chance to scan over this assignment so you're kind of familiar with it. Thumbs up if you've looked at it already. Okay, so let's talk through it. The overall concept for you is to make a comprehensive examination of propaganda in your life today. It's due next Tuesday, September 19th by midnight. All my deadlines end at midnight. So Princeton communication psychology professor Hadley Cantrill once pointed out that we must understand our own biases, the forces in the environment that have given us our particular status and our particular opinions. Although it is perhaps inevitable that we will accept propaganda that suits our personal interests and reinforces our identity, the processes of selecting, filtering, and assessing propaganda can be made more intentional and more mindful through personal reflection. Pay special attention to the websites, newspapers, books, movies, music, video games, TV shows, and the social media networks that you use for 1 week. Consider how many different forms of propaganda you encounter there. You may find propaganda in entertainment, advertising, news and journalism, public relations, politics and government, education, and even in forms of activism and advocacy. You might want to review the worksheet to think about how to find examples from your life. Compose an essay that describes and comments on 6 different current examples of propaganda in your life. Use ideas from the readings to explain why these particular examples are forms of propaganda. Be sure to include at least 2 images in your blog post, and where appropriate, use hyperlinks to relevant content. I'm expecting this to be about at least 1,000 words. That's about 5 double-spaced pages. It might be longer. We're going to use these criteria for evaluation. So it's worth 150 points. So we'll literally go sentence by sentence to provide evaluation for your work. I'll ask, does your essay provide a comprehensive examination of propaganda in your life with a special focus on 6 examples of propaganda in entertainment, advertising, news, journalism, and public relations, politics and government, education, activism, and advocacy? I'll ask, is the content well organized with good use of descriptive writing that helps the reader visualize examples and understand your interpretation of these messages, which might be potentially beneficial or harmful? Have you used subheads in your writing, plus a minimum of 1 visual image and 1 hyperlink to web content in your essay? And number 3, have you made explicit reference to some ideas from the course readings to deepen your interpretation of propaganda in your life? Have you used the practices of summarizing, paraphrasing, and direct quotation? Have you used an author-date citation format, which looks like this, an author-date citation format, right? Along with a works cited list in APA format. And if you click here, of course, you'll find what does that look like and what is that format, right? So there it is, right? And have you posted the essay to the website and tweeted a link to it using the COM416 hashtag? Okay, so what questions do you have about Leap 1?
Do you want us to send a copy to you on like a Word document, or are we just posting it to our blog and that's it?
Nope, don't send it to me any other way. Just post it to your blog and tweet me the link. Tweet a link that includes the COM416 hashtag. I'll find it. Okay, good question. Who's got another question?
Are we just picking one form of propaganda to choose from? One form of media, or do we have to pick several?
Great question. Let's go back to the share screen, right? So the criteria says you're going to have to find 6 examples of propaganda. in entertainment, advertising, news, journalism, and public relations, politics and government, education, activism, and advocacy. So you're given a kind of very, very clear idea. So what was that? I missed that question?
It always goes up and down.
Oh, I don't know who's
when the thermostat opens and closes.
That's somebody. Who's got another question?
Citations for the propaganda that we're consuming, I guess. Do you want all the citations there, or how do you want us to manage that, I guess?
Yeah, great point. So when you're using an author date citation, you're probably going to need to take a look at electronic sources or non-print sources. If you find it on a website, how do you cite it, right? If you find it in an ebook, if you find it on a blog post, if you find it as a map, right? If you find it as slides, if you find it as in a discussion group or a blog post. So practicing citing digital sources, if you find it as a podcast, right?
Well, I was more thinking, like, what if we're watching the news and we see something? Should we go online and find the news source, or should we cite what we're viewing?
That's a great question. I think you could probably do it either way, Kristen. I could imagine seeing something in the news or listening to something on the radio and just writing descriptively about it. But then I could also imagine the power of being able to find that. Maybe sometimes you can find it. Sometimes you can see a commercial on TV and then go find that commercial on YouTube, right? Other times you can't. So that, I think, depends on really what you select. But I'm glad you asked that. Good question. Who's got another question?
Did you want an example of each of the 6? So the 6 examples would be one from each category.
Yep.
Okay, just clarifying.
Who's got another question? Okay, so I think the thing that generally what I found in the past that, my goal is to have everybody in this room get an A. I want you all to be successful, and when I get to give out lots of A's, I'm a person with high expectations. I'm very, very proud and happy of that. In the past, where students have screwed up is with this key sentence right here. I don't know if you guys can see that. Can you see that? I'm going to open my screen.
Not yet.
And I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to go back to that assignment. Give me a thumbs up if you can see it now. What I have found in the past that students sometimes, in their excitement about writing about the various kinds of propaganda that they find in their life, they forget that you have to make explicit reference to some ideas from the course readings to deepen your interpretation of propaganda in your life. Fortunately, this week we are reading Trust Me, I'm Lying, right? Which will give you all kinds of ideas. And of course, the Lexicon of Lies essay, I think, and some other of the other short readings will be useful to you as well. Okay, so I think you're probably well prepared to compose this piece of media, your Leap 1 essay. And so what I'll do is I'll go back to the schedule. We have just about 10 minutes left, so we're right on schedule for today. Let's review the class participation activities on Pathread that you're going to be doing this week, right? And really that is a pretty intensive focus on Ryan Holiday's Trust Me, I'm Lying. This is available as a Kindle edition, so if you haven't yet got the book, you can get immediate access to it through Amazon, right? So you can read the ebook version of it. But this week, I'm going to ask you to drill down on week 3, promotion and marketing as propaganda. Give me a thumbs up if you are a PR major. Are there any PR majors in this room? All right, so promotion and marketing can be understood as types of contemporary propaganda, and in a digital age, we learn why blogs matter, how they drive the news, and how they can be manipulated. We're reading Ryan Holiday's great book. The first half of the book is about the first 130 pages or so. It's a fast and furious read. It's not an academic book at all. He's sharing his secrets of being a down and dirty marketer. So here are the 3 tasks I'd like you to complete as you read the book. First, choose 3 of the questions below and summarize and analyze. So this might structure your reading. These are 3 questions, and you place your answer in the box below. Step 2, I'd like you to share your insights on the reading using Twitter. Send 2 tweets to quote from and comment on some key ideas in the book. Be sure to use the COM416 hashtag so I'll be able to find it. And finally, I'd like you to make a connection between the reading and the vocabulary you're using. Ryan Holiday, he doesn't use technical words at all. All right, he talks a lot about propaganda, but he doesn't use any of the vocabulary. So we're going to have to do that. So here, as you read Ryan Holiday, consider how the stories and ideas that he's revealing about his work as a marketer for American Apparel and other companies, how they relate to this new vocabulary of terms associated with propaganda, especially the ideas introduced by Carol and Jack in Lexicon of Lies, and the poster that we just looked at. Make a Flipgrid comment no longer than 90 seconds in length to make a connection between these 2 readings. Give me a thumbs up if you've used Flipgrid before. Okay, so Flipgrid is a really powerful tool. We're going to use it almost every week in this class. Here's how it works. It's an asynchronous video sharing tool. So the assignment is Ryan Holiday shares the stories of his success in marketing and promotion, but some of his stories may remind you of key terms, concepts, and vocabulary you learned from Caroline Jack. So you click the green button. You take a photo of yourself by hitting that red button. Oh, the recording's going to start. Okay, now I'm going to make a kind of a spontaneous comment about Ryan Holiday. A lot of times is talking about disinformation. There are some stories he tells in this book about when he was a marketer at American Apparel and how he deliberately deceived journalists. There are a couple of stories here about how he used hoaxes to trick people into writing about his company, and I'm going to blah, 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 say something and try to make sense of it. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. When I'm done, now I'm going to make a kind of a spontaneous comment about Ryan Holiday. A lot of times, if I don't like it and I sound like a complete idiot, I can re-record it. Okay, but you don't really need to worry about it being like absolutely perfect. It's sort of like a comment you might make in a face-to-face class where you do your best to say something that moves the discussion forward. You upload it, you take a picture of yourself, and I guess you can add a sticker. Who cares about that stuff? And I think you can submit. I have to put my name. Okay, I have to put my name so I get credit for this, and that's all I really have to put. And so now, notice, there's my message. When you show up at the Flipgrid, if you're the first person like me, you just get to go ahead and make your comment. If you're the second person, you have to watch the first person, the person behind you, and connect. So you don't have to watch every single one of the 26 videos, but you have to make at least a connection between the one that came before you. These are all going to pile up. And really, we're trying to model with this tool the seminar experience, where if we were in a face-to-face class, Alex would say something brilliant, and I would raise my hand and I would say, like Alex said, I agree with him about blah, 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 but I also think, and then you would add your 2 cents, right? So because we're building this course on the principle that everybody learns from everybody, if you just make your little flip grid and say your 90 seconds, you're not going to learn from any of the other really smart people in this room, right? And we're really going to learn a lot if we're like listening and sharing with each other. So I think you're going to have a great time with the flip grid this week. It should really help us connect the dots between this book and what we've been in, and what we're talking about in terms of marketing, promotion, and publicity. Okay, so let me see if you guys have any questions about that. So that's the step 2. That's really the main activity for this week. You can see there are some other, hold on here, try to get it to go back. What's going on here? I guess I'll have to, sometimes when my computer freezes, I will reshare with you. Going back to our week 3 page for this week and going down the list. I put the syllabus here as an anchor to remind you that we're following this class syllabus. It's duplicating what we're doing here week by week. But you're going to have an incredible ride. Ryan Holiday may freak you out because he's a very unusual marketer. And he's going to reveal some tricks and techniques that are a little bit destabilizing to your thinking about marketing and promotion. I would like you to take a look at the poster. That's the misleading news. I would like you to study the Pepsi Lives Matter campaign. That's the Kendall Jenner for Pepsi commercial. Give me a thumbs up if you saw that this summer. Yeah, sure. Short article called Pepsi Pulls Ad Accused of Trivializing Black Lives Matter from the New York Times. And then use the video ant to comment on that Pepsi commercial. So watch that Pepsi commercial and comment on it, right? That should be insightful and fun. And come back next week. Come back next week for our conversation about promotion and marketing as propaganda. If you guys have questions as you're working through this week's activity, feel free to email Sait Tuzel, the research assistant, teaching assistant, or myself. I think I'm going to just give a last word minute for anybody who has any last minute questions. So as we always do, the tradition begins. We are going to sign off our class right now with our class hand sign. So first of all, get your hands into the screen. I gotta see the hands. Show me the hands. Okay, this time we're gonna say goodbye with the Pulp Fiction, with the Pulp Fiction sign. So signing off. This is Renee Hobbs, top of the 416. Great students. You guys are the best. Thanks for playing with me. We'll see you next Tuesday at 4 o'clock. Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you.